Let the proposition be pressed to its most uncompromising formulation in an empirical reality that's not ontologically primitive, but second order. A derivative manifestation of antecedent structuring processes. What presents itself as the material world may be more rigorously understood as a superficial stratum, the perceptible sediment of an underlying non-manifest regime of coordination. Prior to their consolidation into tangible phenomena, events are schematized in a pre-material domain with agencies. One might designate these as a field of governance. These don't coignite. They're derivative from a rather constitutional architecture of adjudication embedded within cognition itself. They function as meta-organizational matrices that allocate probabilities, legitimate certain vectors of becoming, and systematically marginalize alternative trajectories by relegating them to insignificance. Within this framework, matter works as a substrate, and what is ordinarily interpreted as contingency, economic ascent, social mobility, and effective coupling reveals itself as a downstream-upstream pattern. Governance accordingly exceeds the confines of a corporate scheme and pursues archetypal nometic forms. They're concerned and constrained, institutionalized through the apparatuses, technological infrastructures, and interiorized schemas of belief. The subject experiences itself as a refuge, and the horizon available options has been pre-structured, curated, and delimited by an invisible syntax of permissions and prohibitions. Embedded within the syntax is a distributive logic that may be characterized as quota-like. The dispersion of potentiality is asymmetrical. Distinct segments of the populations are endowed with different leverage. This inequality materializes through differential access to what may be named tokens and authorizations. Such tokens are not just monetary, they're a digital material and equally reputational, visibility gradients, and network access and legitimacy. Currency in this sense represents merely the most formalized and crystallized expression of a more general economy of ascension, and the accumulation of these tokens goes into the topology of the reality where token decks are high. They resist preemptive neutralizations and pathways are smoothed. And here it's anticipatorial, as if the governing field is registering this or recalibrating the distribution in favor of the token bearer. We're constricted by the operative fields and the possibilities contract. Risk deviation incurs penalties. Inequality, therefore, cannot be reduced to economic disparity alone. It assumes an ontological dimension, modulating the very texture, permeability, and affordance structure of lived reality. Crucially, these governance fields don't rely exclusively on external compulsion. Their efficacy is predicated upon alignment and internalization. Normative as legitimate, credible success, desirable affiliation, simulated pre-reflectively. Subjects become conduits for reproductives on these. So the explicit codification is not necessary, and governance has an autopoietic simultaneous, the agents are regulators of others, perpetuating norms that are nowhere normally ubiquitously operative. Contemporary digital structures intensify and accelerate these cymatic and demonic dynamics, transmuted into capital, and recursively amplifying its concentration. Capital begets visibility, visibility engenders influence, and influence recalculates the feedback loop in which accumulation compounds, generating an increasingly stratified distribution of tokens. The governance fields begin to approximate self-optimizing cybernetic engines, prioritizing those already privileged. These structuring agencies, these governance fields, are not omnipotent in any transcendent or mythological sense. They're emergent foundations from aggregated cognition. Their persistence is a continuous enactment. As far as they believed, operationalized, and instantiated. Authority in the schema is not centralized but diffusely distributed through tiny micro acts. Every selection, transaction, endorsement functions as a minimal yet very important pivotal implication that follows. Privilege is not solely a matter of the physical. Let the proposition be pressed to its most uncompromising imperial reality, not ontologically primitive, but second order. A derivative manifestation of antecedent structuring processes. What presents itself as the material world may be more rigorously understood as a superficial stratum, the perceptible sediment of an underlying non-manifest regime of coordination. Prior to their consolidation into tangible phenomena, events are schematized within a prematerialized domain populated by organizing agencies. One might designate these as fields of governance. These don't coincide narrowly with institutional or judicial governments, and juridical rather cognition itself. They function as meta-organizational matrices that allocate probabilities, legitimate certain vectors of becoming, and marginalize alternative trajectories by relegating them to statistical insignificance. In this way, this framework operates as an executional substrate. What is ordinarily interpreted as contingency, economic ascent, social mobility, effective coupling reveals itself as a downstream realization of upstream patterning in the corporate stream. It perceives algorithmic, archetypal, and mnemic forms and goes through the apparatuses, technological infrastructure, and internalized schemas of belief. When we experience ourselves as agents of belief and choice, we curate and delimit an invisible syntax of permissions and prohibitions. Embedded within this syntax is something you don't want to talk about. Embedded within this syntax is a logic that may be characterized as quota-like. The dispersion of potentiality is asymmetrical. The distinct segment of the population are endowed with disproportionate degrees of leverage. This inequality materializes through differential access to what may be termed as tokens. Such tokens manifest not only as monetary, but digital material, as reputational capital, visibility gradients, network access, and narrative legitimacy. Currency, in this sense, represents merely the most formalized and crystallized expression of a more general economy of permission.